Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 172 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones, Dominic Aragon here with you as we look back at the weekend that was at Atlanta. And what an exciting race that we saw this past weekend that came down right to the very end. And a little controversy, much to discuss there. We'll talk about that coming up in just a bit. We'll also look ahead to this weekend's race in Austin at Circuit of the Americas. I'll be there this weekend, my first race of the year. I can't remember. This might be the first time ever that I get out to a racetrack before Dominic does in a NASCAR season.
Shocker.
Uh, we've always been at least at the same time, but nonetheless, we'll talk about COTA. I'm excited about that. We'll have plenty to discuss and more coming up later on in the show. But we begin with the win for Christopher Bell this past weekend in Atlanta. Dom, let's start with the positives before we get any controversy and all that. Christopher Bell didn't lead a single lap all race except the final lap when it mattered most. And I know that there was some shenanigans that went on, and again, we'll talk about controversy here in just a bit. But what a move by Christopher Bell to get there, to be aggressive, competing right there with Hocevar and Kyle Larson. And we saw the Fords, the Penske guys dominate for much of the day. The Toyotas didn't really do much. And then Christopher Bell just comes out of nowhere. I mean, I thought that was an awesome win. That was big for him and that 20 team to get that win in Atlanta. And on top of that, too, we typically don't talk about Christopher Bell at drafting tracks, not at Atlanta. That was awesome. That's a huge deal for that group.
20-1, too. We talked about on the show last week if you'd pick Christopher Bell to win, which he did. So, and one thing we have gotten used to, though, Tyler, and I remember we made a big deal out of it, too, because we were fresh on doing this show maybe 15 episodes in, that 2021 NASCAR season when NASCAR had to adjust the schedule and they run the second race of the year at the Daytona Road Course. And who wins race number 2? His first career win, Christopher Bell. And to think that was already 4 years ago. Doesn't feel like it, but nonetheless, a great win there. That puts him at 10 wins now, 66th driver in NASCAR history to crack the double-digit mark. So that's pretty spectacular when you're able to tie Donnie Allison, Sterling Marlin, and Clint Boyer on the wins list. You're starting to move into some serious territory, and he's just getting started.
Yeah, and I think for Christopher Bell, you win this race. We know that team is going to be so strong the rest of the year, and they've been in the championship 4 now a couple times. I think you got to talk about Christopher Bell already being a championship threat because this was not a race, Dom. I don't. I'd say this with all due respect. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all when I say this. That was not a race he was supposed to win, right? We think Christopher Bell, it's the road courses, it's the short tracks, heck, even the mile and a half for that matter. Drafting tracks aren't really his thing. The Toyotas weren't very strong this weekend at Atlanta. If he can win a race like that, then in theory, I know what I'm about to say next might sound crazy. It kind of gets easier for him of the races he should win now.
Exactly, and I think too worth noting, Tyler, this was Joe Gibbs's first win since New Hampshire, Loudon in June or July, and Christopher Bell was the last driver to take a JGR car to victory lane. It had been 8 months. If you really think about it, that's wild to think that. But Christopher Bell did say in his post-race press conference too that there was a bigger expectation this year to be competitive out of the gate, and that Las Vegas and Homestead, a lot of these tracks he has circled that they need to go out and go win. Or I'm sorry, not Homestead, Circuit of the Americas, which is upcoming this weekend, and how well he's running all these tracks. I'd put him in that same conversation as Kyle Larson, where you look and see that they have similar racing backgrounds, where they're both really good at a lot of things, and super speedway racing just hadn't been one of those things they were good at over the years. But we saw both of them up front when that counted. This could be very easily a Kyle Larson discussion that we could be having right now because it could have gone either way.
Yeah, how about that? Let's go to Larson next. He finishes third. Strong day for him. Was running up front for much of the afternoon. No secret, he's not great on drafting tracks. Hasn't done well at Atlanta, and I felt like this was a breakthrough day for him. He is so good everywhere else, but drafting tracks have been such a weakness for him. I know he would have loved to win the race, and he very well could have won the race. But just to finish top three and be in position there, I think that's huge for Kyle Larson. You talk about confidence. You've gotten two of these drafting tracks out of the way now. You got four more races on the drafting tracks. If you're that five team, now you got to be thinking, okay, we got over the hump. We competed at Atlanta. We can go win anywhere now.
Feel like there's momentum too behind this because if you recall at Talladega, he was top five as well in the fall race with Ricky Stenhouse and Brad Keselowski in their battle. And he didn't seem to have the best car in Daytona, but that gets erased with natural momentum now coming from the Atlanta race. And another driver here too that we're expecting probably to have 5, 6 wins by the time we get to Phoenix at the end of the year. Him and Christopher Bell are two likely drivers that we're going to see in that championship for.
Yeah, I think so. All right, we got to talk Carson Hocevar now. A lot of people mad at Carson Hocevar with how he raced, and he ultimately finished the second best finish of his career. Hell of a day. Let me say that. Let's start on the positive there. Hell of a day for Carson Hocevar. Spire's shown a lot of speed, and there was questions about, hey, with the investments they're making, bringing in McDowell, bringing in Rodney Childress, and all this, were they going to take that step up? And they looked really good. He had legit speed, one of the fastest cars in the field. Great day for Carson Hocevar. I think he's got a lot of talent. I was impressed with him in the Truck Series a couple of years ago. On the positive side of things, this was a big Carson Hocevar and Spire as a whole. I mean, with Justin Haley there, Michael McDowell, I feel like that there's a very good chance that that could be the breakout organization of the year here, Dom.
Oh, certainly. And I don't think it can be understated too. If we're talking the Spire Motorsports camp, did you see, and I'm sure many of you followed along with this, Michael McDowell and his issues with the power steering pump and having to drop back at the end of stage one, going to the garage area, getting that replaced, and Tyler receiving 6 free passes to get back on the lead lap. You want to talk gutsy performances. That is one of the most gutsy performances I have ever seen in a race where you have a driver that just has that resilience that does not give up and comes back and not only gets back on the lead lap, finishes on the lead lap, finishes 13th, and his teammate finishes second in Carson Hocevar. What an all-around wholesome day for Spire Motorsports. Now, of course, it didn't get met without controversy, too, where you have Ross Chastain, Ryan Blaney wanting to talk with him post-race, and Kyle Busch saying, too, that Hocevar was making moves that you would see with 20 laps to go, not 20 laps into the race. But nonetheless, a great day for the organization. But I have to bring that up there too, Tyler. I don't know if you followed that McDowell story very closely, but when he went 6 laps down, I thought, oh, well, he's probably going to finish 6 laps down.
Yeah, unbelievable for him to finish on the lead lap after all that what was said and done. Great run for him. Now, with Carson Hocevar, the flip side of things, how he raced, how he finished second, pissing off everybody in the field. We all heard Kyle Busch's radio. I don't need to say those words. If you haven't heard it, it's worth your time. A little radioactive action of sorts there. But we saw the exchange with Ross Chastain after the race. I thought that was pretty rich coming from Ross Chastain, of all people, too. They complain about that. But, you know, I look at it twofold, Dom. I think two things can be true. Was Hocevar over aggressive? Yeah. Was he taking things over the top? Yeah. But it's his second year of full-time cup racing. That's the most speed you could argue he's ever shown in a car. There's going to be a learning curve to all this. I think that he'll get better with age. I think we've already seen, we mentioned Ross a second ago. Ross, he's still got a ways to go, but he's shown a lot more maturity and how he's handled his aggressiveness. I think it just kind of comes with time. Yes, people are going to be pissed off, and it's going to make things hard on him racing these guys in the field. But I think that a lot of it just shows age. He's still a young guy. I think it just kind of comes with the territory too.
Ryan Blaney wouldn't agree with you on that. His post-race comments, he had said too, he goes, and I'm paraphrasing, but here's a guy that we've seen race in the trucks. He's been in Cup now for a couple of years, but I don't know. Ryan Blaney, I don't think was sold on that excuse. But then again, he got punted going off into one. Blaney said he didn't lift, but Hocevar just kept pushing him going off into one. And Blaney had a pretty impressive save there on the apron to come back and finish fourth the way he did. Certainly a comeback of sorts on that as well. But I think too, to Carson's defense too. And I know you're active on social media, Tyler. I'm sure you saw the retweet on X that Mark Martin had with pretty much saying F him to all the people that are hating on Carson Hocevar right now. He's just doing his thing.
Now, the arguably the quote of the weekend. Um, Let me read this word for word of what Carson Hocevar had to say. We're here to win races, not be a boy band and love each other. Carson, totally get where you're at and understand where you're coming from, but don't you have to start by winning races first?
Well, he was close. Was he third at Watkins Glen last year? Now he's second this week, and I think he said you got to lose some before you win one. And I think he's lost a couple of them now, but he's pissed off the field on his way to his second place finish.
Um, do you think that there's payback coming for Carson Hocevar in the near future, or do you think people are going to forget about this by next week?
I don't think you can look further than what Kyle Busch said. Kyle Busch definitely has a long-term memory, and I think Kyle Busch would be the first one to pay that back at Martinsville if that opportunity were to come up. But I don't know. I think maybe the jury's still on. I feel like as a competitor, you're going to be racing against this guy all year through November. Maybe you're less likely to cut him a break the next go around. He's got to earn that respect back. I think on somebody like Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, these guys that run in the top five. And I've heard drivers say it before too, Tyler, that the guys that you're racing for 25th versus the guys you're racing for fifth, it's a different style of racing. So I'm sure some of that chalks into this too.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, it's totally different running up front than it is running in the back, and I think that Carson Hocevar is learning that as we speak. Now let's get to the moment everybody's been waiting for. Uh, they call at the end of the race. They throw the caution as the leaders were getting very close to the start finish line, three wide. Could have been an epic finish like it was a year ago in Atlanta. Hell, they made a movie about it last year and all, but ultimately they threw the caution. Now, what we heard from Elton Sawyer was that the drivers asked them and said, please call these cautions in these situations, in these scenarios. And that's ultimately what they did. But with that said, Dom, here's where I take issue with. All right. Let me make this very clear. My problem is the inconsistencies here. I here's the thing, Dom. I'm not sitting here. I want to make one thing clear. I'm not sitting here and saying they need to let drivers drive back to the line every time. I'm not saying that's what needs, I even heard somebody throw out the idea maybe we need to get AI involved and freeze the back of the field and let the leaders run to the line. I'm not even saying that. I just want the same thing called because here we are now. This is four different instances where nothing's on the same page. The dual race at Daytona, the Daytona 500, the Xfinity race in Atlanta, and the Cup race in Atlanta, and we've seen different scenarios play out here. This is what I have issue with, and this is why I believe Elton Sawyer should be fired immediately, is because it's inconsistent. Either let them race back to the line or call the caution consistently, one or the other here. I don't care which one you choose. In fact, if you decide that, hey, we are going to call the caution, we're going to be aggressive in calling those cautions, then do so. Don't change it every week. I don't think it's fair to the fans. I don't think it's fair to the drivers. They should know what the expectation is. You can't argue safety one week and then not do it another. That is my issue with how this was handled here. I'm not arguing that they need to let them race the line. I just want consistency, Dom. Am I being unrealistic in what I'm asking for?
You might be surprised about what I'm going to say, but I actually agree with a lot of the points that you're making here because you're right. We've seen four different things called the dual race and how that ended a caution and messing up the right of photo finish, but that's done in the name of safety. But then the Daytona 500, where they're running at full speed, they make it to the finish line and they let them race it out, which I think was a shock. Then they do the same thing in Atlanta and in the Xfinity race, that is. And Elton Sawyer says in that drivers' meeting, okay, we messed up. This is the Sunday before the Cup race. If it comes down to it, they will call a caution. And Denny Hamlin said it on his Actions Detrimental podcast earlier this week. You don't want none of those drivers are going to want to drive through that 180 miles an hour and afraid of hitting something or injuring themselves or somebody else. Those are legitimate concerns. And in the name of safety, I think all that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, I think where I disagree with you is saying that we got to fire Elton Sawyer. That might be a little extreme, but I do think there needs to be something done as far as the instead of reactive approach that we're seeing with NASCAR, we need to see a more proactive approach, and I think we will see that proactive approach going forward. If this is in the name of safety and drivers are saying themselves they don't want to be driving through this, I think NASCAR will absolutely be considering that. Now, are they trying to have where the racing ends under a green flag? Absolutely. So I feel like those situations are being looked at. And your buddy and a friend of the show, Adam Alexander with the CW, who does the play-by-play for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, had even said during the telecast on Saturday that each situation is unique and kind of offered that perspective that it all depends on where those emergency vehicles are. So a lot of the infield turnoffs, those entrance and exit points where you would have safety vehicles, certainly plays a role into that too. I think going forward, right? We're not going to just come here with some problems without bringing some solutions. Maybe being more aware of those, where those exit points are, what NASCAR's thinking. So at least we know that logic going forward. Well, hey, maybe they're less likely to call a caution at, say, a Martinsville or a Bristol versus a mile and a half or a super speedway. But at least we know that going in. I don't know if this is a rule book warranted change, but I do agree with you that there needs to be some sort of consistency. And maybe the way you get there is by having more transparency.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that they need to let them race back to the line.
I'm
You
with you.
know,
Mhm.
there's a big safety component involved, and we've seen way too much just kind of scary stuff with this new car. I think for any of us to feel comfortable with the idea of them racing back to the line, and you know, the other idea, you one thing I think has been thrown out there, Dom, is people are saying, well, what about just do another overtime if the caution flag comes out during the white? Okay, you want to do that? You want to race all night? Because that's what will happen. Like it would just be never ending overtimes over and over again. You think we do a lot of overtimes now with if the caution comes out before the white, we're doing it again. I mean, there's got to be some balance here. Like we grew up, Dom, watching this sport, and it was a natural thing when a race would end under caution, and it was uneventful, and it sucked, but it was a reality we faced, and it still goes on to this day in IndyCar. It still goes on to this day in F1. It's only NASCAR that's created this overtime system. you know, NASCAR toyed with the overtime line for a while, and they ended up taking that out. I think I don't know if I have the perfect solution of how they should do this. I don't think any of us necessarily do. All I'm asking for is, can we get consistency? Can we get clarity from NASCAR? And just all be on the same page. I think NASCAR owes it to the fans, the drivers, and the teams to have a standard of how to approach this.
And would transparency be the move
Yes,
here? Like we were talking about, hey, like the safety vehicles are here. Here's what our thought process is. 4 laps to go, 3 laps to go. We see something, we're gonna throw the caution. Like, do these things need to be outlined in a driver's meeting or for the public to know? Would that help with trying to bring some sort of solution to this, or at least a starting point?
I think, Dom, a starting point should be if this is good enough to bring out a caution on lap one of the race, it should be good enough to bring out a caution on the final lap of the race. I think all cautions should be viewed equally. Like, I think that's a good place to start is what is the definition of a caution, what warrants a caution, and we have to call it the same throughout the race. I mentioned last week the football example. I don't want to be in a situation where we get to the end of the game and it's like, well, we can't call holding because it's in the game. Like, no, if he's holding him with a minute to go in the football game compared to the first minute of the football game, it's still holding either way. Like, I think that's where we start is we define what warrants a caution, and it's got to be consistent the whole race.
I think that's a fair ask, and that creates that transparency that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think so.
We're on
And
the same page here, Tyler. There's a lot of things here I think you and I are actually surprisingly on the same page because we know we're not always on the same page on this stuff, but I
no,
think end game we are. I think this one is something, it's in the name of safety and the name of transparency.
so let me ask you this then. Um, you've heard what I'm saying. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other of if they should let them race back to line or if they should call caution at the end of the race, whatever. I just want to see consistency. Do you lean one way to the other when it comes to would you like to see them be more proactive on calling a caution, or would you like to see them more of the time race back to the line? Do you have a strong feeling one way or the other?
I feel like the right answer there would be to be a little more trigger happy on the caution. If we're erring on the side of safety, I don't think you're going to be faulted. Yeah, you might get a little bit of money more quarterbacking on it on what could have happened. But outside of that, I think if we're erring on the side of safety, throwing a caution every time, no one's going to question that. I think most people are
Yeah.
going to be okay. They might be pissed in the moment or annoyed because a race didn't go green, but I think erring on the side of caution and safety, if that's what the big thing is here, I'm 100% behind that. I think that's where I would lean on this entire issue. And two, I think I have to add as well, if we're throwing the caution again as the leader's coming off of turn four on the checkered flag and we have to re-rack, that's just going to create some issues. I think Denny Hamlin said on his podcast, maybe that's the ultimate way to police themselves, but I don't know. I think you kind of have to set up some guardrails here, and those would be the guardrails that NASCAR has set that, look, we get the white flag, the race is over. Everyone knows the rules going in.
Yes. Everybody needs to be on the same page, and NASCAR needs to figure this out. I would say the silver lining, Dom, as infuriating as this has been, these four races, I don't think we're going to have this issue more than likely for a while because we're done with drafting tracks for a bit till we get to Talladega in what is it, April, May, something like that. Like I would be very surprised in the next several weeks if we have this issue again. I think NASCAR kind of gets some time to figure out and get the drivers and everybody on the same page to what they want to do, how they want to address this going forward.
Well, and I think it just shows the human element behind it at the end of the day. Because I believe even the dual race versus the Daytona 500, you get two different people in the tower making that call. So it shows there's human factor involved in this too. So it's multi-layered. And you look at this weekend, I think this weekend will be a great example of that. We'll talk about COTA in a minute, but the fact that you could have local cautions, you have those at road courses. You don't have those on most other tracks. But if a car spins and is able to continue or spins in front of the field, unless there's a lot of damage or oil leaking out, you're typically not going to see a caution at a road course. So again, that discretion, but we know that going in, and NASCAR is transparent about that in the drivers' meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. Should be interesting to see. Let's look ahead at this weekend's race at Circuit of the Americas, the home of F1 in the United States. This is one of the tracks where NASCAR is really a guest of the racetrack. I think this and kind of Indianapolis, where it's not our venue. This is not a home game for us. This is us, visiting here, and it's unique. This road course is my favorite road course. It's going to be a different style than what we've seen. The shorter course, not new to COTA. MotoGP runs the shorter course and some other series. I think the V8 supercars ran the shorter course as well over the years. And from my understanding, it's actually not really going to take away that much. Still going to be pretty similar to what we've seen, typically speaking. But with that said, Circuit of the Americas, this track has put on a show. I think it's been arguably the best addition to the NASCAR schedule in the last few years. The attendance has been incredible. It replaced the spring Texas race. And not only has it been a better race than Texas, attendance and excitement around the race has been much better than Texas, as Texas has kind of fallen off over the last several years here. And a market in Austin, a thriving, emerging city in the U.S. I think this race has been a home run. And I was telling somebody was asking me the other day, how big of a deal is this race like compared to the rest of the NASCAR schedule of the 36 races? And I said, Dom, uh, I think this is probably a top 10 race every year in the schedule now. This become a marquee event of sorts.
You've hyped this up too every year we've been on the podcast with, and it's been on my short list to get to. One of the few I've never been to. Here, Nashville's on the top of that list, same as Martinsville. Three tracks I've never been to. But I do have to ask before we get more into diving into the nuts and bolts here, Tyler. When you look at this race, and this being the fifth installment, did rain deter anybody in 2021? Because there was such excitement. And we know the race got all the delays, and then you had the big controversial crash with Cole Custer and Martin Truex, and Chase Elliott ended up winning the rain shortened race. Did that dampen, no pun intended or intended, any momentum going forward, or do we have a short term memory here? Did that have any impact long term on this race?
I don't think so. That feels like such a distant memory now. I think that there was kind of an unrealistic expectation of, hey, if F1 can get 400,000 people here in a weekend, then what could NASCAR do? But I mean, just kind of put this in perspective. I have to remind people of this all the time. Like, yeah, F1 gets these crazy crowds for Austin, Vegas, and Miami, but if all of a sudden, Dom, we said, yeah, we're only going to have three NASCAR races in the US this year, you could pick three random locations in the country and they would all sell out and have hundreds of thousands of people too. I mean, it was never going to be as big as the F1 race in Austin, but it has become a marquee event. It is one of the biggest events in the city of Austin, one of the biggest events in the state of Texas now. And the weather's usually great outside of that first year with the rain that had the impact here. Um, I think it's a home run. And like I run into people the last few years they've been in this race, Dom, that were not even NASCAR fans. Maybe they were more open wheel, F1 IndyCar fans. And they made a point to, hey, we like COTA, we like coming to Austin, we're going to be here. You know, what I find interesting too, we mentioned about NASCAR being a guest of this track. Uh, they run it. They don't own the track though. And there's a deal in place with the ownership of Circuit of the Americas and SMI, kind of a trade agreement of sorts to be able to host this race. They kind of split the revenues. But you think about it, all the properties SMI owns, and when they had the race, there was no guarantee that they would do this long term. The idea was like, hey, let's try it. And if it works out, then maybe we keep going there. Maybe we go back to one of our properties. But this thing's been so successful, Dom, that they keep on going back. And you think about there's a couple of tracks that SMI owns that they don't have races at right now. To me, that's a sign of the success that here we are 5 years in. Doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. COTA loves having them there. SMI loves being there. The fact that SMI could be running one of their own racetracks, but they choose to run at COTA, I think that's a big deal.
I think it says a lot. And I was doing a story earlier this week with a reporter from KXAN, the NBC affiliate in Austin. One thing we were talking about this race is somebody who's never been there, but I know she, the reporter Grace Reader, and yourself have been there as well. One thing she and I were talking about was the fact that this race and this venue, the TV just doesn't do it justice. Because whether you're a casual race fan or the diehard NASCAR fan or somewhere in the middle of that, or maybe not even a race fan, but you see this thing on TV or you go to the track, it is going to be way different than most any type of NASCAR race you're used to seeing. Because I think everyone has their preconceived notions. You're driving fast, you're turning left, you're going in circles, whatever you want to call it. You're not seeing that this weekend. You're seeing the elevation changes. And I can only imagine actually being on that track. We were joking about this too, Tyler, about it'd probably be a good incline workout to do a run or some sort of bike ride up that straight away into the first turn because again the elevation changes, the lefts, the rights, the technicality now too, where you're going to have this track shorter by a mile and change, maybe 1.2 miles roughly. More laps, 65 to 95 laps. You're going to have shorter caution periods. Tyler, I'm sure you can relate to this. A caution period is very long there at Circuit of the Americas, 5 minutes per lap, I would imagine. So that's going to be shortened as well. So I think just the only variable we have to worry about, at least at the time of the taping of the show, is 20% chance of rain on Sunday. But even then, we know the forecast can change a lot between midweek to the race weekend.
So we're going to give our picks coming up later, but I got a good stat for you. I know you're usually the stat guy, Dom.
Oh, let's hear
I
it.
know,
Let's hear it.
I know you know this too, but for folks at home that may not know, um, in the past four races at COTA, four different winners. How about that? I think too, and I'm not going to spoil my pick that will give it a bit. I'm thinking we're getting a fifth different winner too. I got a good feeling, Dom. Like this race, um, short course, kind of, we go from 3.426 miles to 2.356. I think that changes things a little bit, not too much, but a little bit anyway. And I think that's going to make things certainly interesting. I think there's a decent chance we get another winner, make it 5 years in a row.
That wouldn't shock me. I think you're onto something there, Tyler, because this race is going to be very technical. The opportunity for more bumping and running, a lot more precision that's going to be needed. This track, there's going to be some mess ups, and there's probably going to be some big ones too. Do we get a surprise winner? Do we get somebody who's favored? I guess we'll have to find out here in a few minutes.
And of those four winners, Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, William Byron. Two in the Hendrick camp, one at Trackhouse, one at 2311, three Chevrolets, one Toyota. Ford yet to get into victory lane at COTA. Could this be their first time? We shall see. Let's get to the news and notes, the top headlines in the sport. Dom, where do you want to start?
We'll start with reporting from Adam Stern at the Sports Business Journal, former friend of the show who's been on with us, with his reporting that the Clash is expected to return to Bowman Gray in 2026. So Bowman Gray, one of NASCAR's longest running tracks, had a sellout crowd. I believe more than 15,000 people were at the Clash this year. And NASCAR is looking at having the race there again in 2026. Now, that does come, I would think, Tyler, at some surprise to maybe some people because it was looking like NASCAR wanted to move that venue out of the country. They were looking at circuit in Brazil, bringing NASCAR racing to South America, and Sao Paulo to be specific, but sounds like it might be staying put at least for one more year.
Yeah, wasn't a bad race at all. Attendance was good, and TV ratings were solid. Speaking of which, ratings are up 10% to start the year compared to this time a year ago. We'll see if that trend continues with less races on network TV this year. But yeah, I think that Bowman Gray did everything they needed to do to keep that race. Jerry was talking about last week that Bowman Gray, the idea is that this is going to be kind of a filler track of sorts that, the Clash, it's kind of a placeholder for now. And we could see it as kind of a placeholder event in the future of sorts, um, which realistically I think is fine, Dom, because it's not the biggest venue. It's an older place, kind of like North Wilkesboro in that sense, too. Like, I think this is a good track for NASCAR to kind of have in their back pocket of sorts, especially with trying to run in the South and reach that audience too. I think that this is good for NASCAR to have as another option. I don't expect it to stay at the Clash to stay there long term, but I do like the idea that this is an kind of an option of sorts for NASCAR to have at their disposal.
You hate to say the word fallback, maybe it has a negative connotation to some people, but this is an awesome fallback, if you want to call it that, or however. If this was the worst case scenario that NASCAR has with the Clash of 2026, it's drummed up a pretty good little event here. We had all the excitement in that preseason event a few weeks ago, and of course, it doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt rather, that you have your most popular driver win the event. So I think that certainly bleeds a lot of good feelings with the event as well too. But the racing was awesome. It had feels of like the LA Clash race that we had seen the last few years. It just happened to be on the East Coast. And what better than a historic venue like Bowman Gray Stadium, a track that the NASCAR Cup Series did run points races on in its early days. So again, fallback may be a bad word to some people, but I got to think there's some pretty good feelings with that.
But we say fallback, Dom. There's a couple tracks I can think of that were thought to be fallback tracks that, to my knowledge, aren't going away anytime soon. St. Louis, they kind of just added to the schedule, like, well, we need somewhere to go, and we got, a market there we can try, and they've sold out every year. They're not leaving St. Louis anytime soon. Iowa was thought of as a fallback track, and last year was a pretty successful race. If Bowman Gray holds its own, then they might not just be a fallback track. They could be an option for more racing, and maybe even if it's not a cup race, like I would think that whether it's truck or Xfinity, some way, shape, or form, Bowman Gray should be on the NASCAR schedule somewhere in NASCAR's top three series for the foreseeable future.
I would have to agree with that too. And like Jerry said last week on our show, if you had some sort of rotation, I like the idea too of maybe if you had North Wilkesboro added to the rotation of a points race instead of the All-Star race, where we shuffle some of these SMI approved, SMI sanctioned events that NASCAR has on the schedule. You have a rotation of sorts. SMI is not afraid to shake things up, like we've clearly seen over the years. So why not do it with these events?
Yeah, maybe so. What else we got?
So it's Heim time. Heim time's going cup racing again in 2025, Tyler. 2311 Racing held a press conference at Atlanta Motor Speedway over the weekend on Sunday, ahead of the Better Health 400, to announce that Corey Heim, veteran of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, will be piloting the number 67 2311 vehicle in select races. And his first race will be coming at your, we'll call it de facto home track, Kansas Speedway, later in May, where he did make his cup debut last May, filling in for Eric Jones, who was sidelined with a back injury from his Talladega crash. So Heim getting some reps in the Cup Series. Heim has been very patient with the Toyota Racing Development Program, running in the Truck Series, but he's also going to be getting some reps in the Xfinity Series as well with Sam Hunt Racing.
Yeah, Corey Heim, I think Bob Popkris had him as his number one prospect in the two series right now in truck and Xfinity, and a lot of hype about him. Obviously, he had a fantastic truck season last year. I was surprised he didn't get moved up to the Xfinity series full time this year. But what I find interesting too, with him being the number one prospect, with coming up through the Toyota ranks, Tom, JGR has obviously been the flagship Toyota team. How did they let him slip? How did 2311 get the rights to him over JGR? Did they outbid him? Did JGR not want him? I'd be very curious what kind of the backstory is there. To me, I think that's a big win for 2311. And you think about their future, I think Tyler Reddick's going to be there for a long time. We'll see about Bubba. I think Bubba's got more work to do as far as this long-term success goes. I think Bubba still needs to take another step up. I'm not sold on Riley Herbst. I think a lot of that had to do with the funding, the money he brought to the table. But if Corey Heim is as good as we expect, he'll be in Cup in no time, I would think. And if you're, I think if you're Bubba Wallace and Riley Hertz, it still might be a couple years, but I bet you're watching your back, because if you don't perform at a high enough level, Corey Heim's coming.
Heim time will replace you real quick. And we've seen Corey win what 12 truck races. He's had select starts in the Xfinity Series, and he's done pretty good in his limited opportunities in that series. So, and I got to say too, in that Cup car with Kansas and Dover, in his fill-in roles, I believe he already ran a 2311 car at Nashville as well. So he's gotten some experience in these Cup cars in this next gen era as well. It's like the whole Connor Zilch, Daniel Suarez type thing here, right? You're kind of watching your back. You've got somebody that's younger who's got more raw talent than you. They always say there's somebody out there that's bigger and better than you. And we're seeing these guys now work through this system. And you bring up a great point too. What happened here? Why did Joe Gibbs Racing defer here with Corey Heim? And what happened in the pipeline? And I know TRD goes and scouts across the country. They take their development very, very seriously. And so it all has to be a part of some grandmaster plan here of what they're thinking of all these puzzle pieces of where they're going. But I'm scratching my head a little bit thinking here, well, why is this not a JGR affiliate thing, but rather a 2311 thing? There has to be more to this story, at least.
Yeah, I'd be very curious. Maybe we'll find out sooner than later what that exactly is. What else we got?
So looking ahead to the NASCAR weekend, we've got a doubleheader. We've got the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the NASCAR Cup Series this weekend at the Circuit of the Americas. Tyler, if you were a gambling man, which I know you are, if you had to guess, who's your odds-on favorite pick for the Cup race on Sunday, and what would their opening odds be without a lap turned on the racetrack?
Um, so I'm gonna guess. that the favorite this week, and this is my pick, so I'll say this at the same time. I'm going to guess the favorite is Shane Van Gisbergen at about 800.
Oh man, you're very close. You nailed the pick. Great
Okay.
pick, by the way. Plus 500.
Ooh,
Now, I have to ask you, just because this name's just jumping off the phone at me as I look at the app that shows the odds this weekend. Who do you think is second, and what do you think their odds are?
second in
And
odds.
don't be afraid to really think outside the box on this one.
Second in odds this week. Maybe Blaney.
That's a good guess. I don't know if this shocks you. This shocks me seeing it, but maybe I shouldn't be shocked. Connor Zilch at plus 650.
Really?
Yes, the 18-year-old who's going to be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut. He's locked in. He's got the track house ride. He won in his debut at Watkins Glen. I think he will contend for a top 10. I think a win. I mean, certainly there'd be a lot of history stamped with that, but
So
to have opening 650 odds was very shocking to me to see that.
yeah, especially we were talking to Jerry about last week of the odds makers were so off on SVG's debut at the Chicago Street Race. Maybe they're trying to get ahead of it on Connor Zilic, of giving him such high odds there. But also, that tells me too that they're very high on Trackhouse. And I've been checking social media. I don't know if you've seen this, Dom, but a lot of people, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that Hendrick Motorsports, that Rick Hendrick had a talk with Chevrolet, and that he has uh, basically hurt Trackhouse and you know made Chevrolet step back their influence into helping out Trackhouse here. But the odds makers think Trackhouse is going to have some speed at this place.
Can't say I've heard that rumor with Rick Hendrick, but yeah, the odds makers are definitely very, very bullish on a Trackhouse vehicle to run. The top two guys are Trackhouse guys. And your next guy, William Byron, last year's winner at plus 750 or 7.5 to 1. Tyler Reddick, who won the race in 2023, plus 800. Christopher Bell, last year's runner up at plus 800. He's my pick, by the way. I think Christopher Bell goes back to back from Atlanta, backs it up with that win at COTA, but we have a fifth different winner. So I'm with you on that page. Kyle Larson, at plus 1,000 or 10 to 1. Chase Elliott, road course ace, the original winner at COTA in 2021 in that rain shortened race, sitting at 1,100 plus 1,100 or 11 to 1. AJ Allmendinger, Tyler, who almost won this race in 2022, who lost it to Ross Chastain on that final lap. They're both sitting at 12 to 1 or plus 1,200. And then you start working your way down the list. Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, 20 to 1. Michael McDowell, 26 to 1. Chase Briscoe, 25 to 1. And then you get to some of your long shots here. Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney sharing the row of 50 to 1 for this race. Brad Keselowski, who has won at road courses before, but it's been years, 200 to 1.
I got a really good bet for you. Um, a buddy of mine sent this to me today. A name to keep an eye on if you want a nice long shot bet. Zane Smith is plus 10,000. He's got two career wins at COTA in the Truck Series. Front row's got a good track record at road courses. I think if you're looking for a nice long shot bet to throw some money down, I think Zane Smith would be a nice one.
And the Caesar Sportsbook, as we take the show, he's sitting at 200 to 1. That's kind of odd. So plus 20,000 on this sports book. So yes, not gambling advice, but certainly a good value pick there if you are into doing your DraftKings or Caesar Sportsbook lineup, whatever you may end up doing. Again, we're not offering gambling advice here, people, but these odds are very fascinating to look at to see what the odds makers think. Who are the favorites?
So I went with SVG. What was your pick?
Christopher Bell,
It's for Bell, back to back. Okay.
back to back, but we have a fifth different winner though in 5 races.
Okay. There you go. So those are our picks for this week. And we'll see how it all shakes out there at COTA. Before we go, time for our mailbag segment. We ask you guys to submit questions to us each and every week on X and on Facebook at Star Podcast. Also by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. You can email us there. Our first question in the inbox this week comes from Cassidy. Cassidy wants to know, guys, do you think William Byron and Sabrina Carpenter would make for a nice couple? Uh, Dominic, to give a little context in case people have been living under a rock, there was a social media post that went viral after the Daytona 500 of William Byron apparently commenting on a post by Sabrina Carpenter, a some might call it a thirst trap of sorts, saying hi with two eyes. That was fake, and it was done by the infamous Daily Downfords account, which has now been shut down, RIP, which was providing just some tremendous content before they got shut down. Very sad.
It sure was.
Uh, but it did go viral, and William Byron got reached out to by TMZ, and then he got asked about it all weekend, and he invited her to a race. He says he hasn't heard back from her, but uh, what started as a joke has taken the internet by storm, and I love it. I want to see William Byron take it a step further. I want him to actually reach out to Sabrina Carpenter personally and maybe slide in the DMs or something. I love to see this be the NASCAR version of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. This could be a big deal for William Byron for NASCAR if Sabrina Carpenter could show up to a race.
And some new eyeballs on the sport. I got to ask you too, Tyler, without really knowing too much on her, is she even a NASCAR fan, an auto racing fan? Has she been to races?
Oh, I have something for you on that actually. Glad you asked. Um, I believe it was 2019, maybe in 2020. She performed at the NASCAR Awards banquet in Vegas.
Oh wow, okay. I was there in 17 and 18. I don't remember. She could have been. I just don't remember. Well, that's for other reasons too. I can't remember one of the awards banquets. That's a story for another day.
Yeah. One of the few nights for Dom that was like that in his life. Um, but yes, she has been in the presence of NASCAR.
Okay.
Uh, and friend of the show, Matt Tiff, it was so funny when William Byron tweeted out it was fake news. He had my favorite response of anybody out there. Um, Matt is like sneaky funny too, by the way. This is really good. I don't know if you saw this, Tom. Matt
Mm.
responded, said, "Do you not like Sabrina Carpenter?"
Oh, that's a clever, witty response. That's Matt Tift humor on brand right there.
So let me make it clear, Dom. I'm all in. Let's make it happen. William Byron, Sabrina Carpenter, sign me up. I'm here for it. Do you approve of this potential couple?
You see this right here? This is my stamp. Got my stamp of approval. There we go. Let's do it.
Okay, that'd be great. And as far as I know, William Byron, things didn't work out with Blaney's sister, Aaron, and
Yeah, they
I
broke up before the 2024 Daytona 500. She was in the Netflix special with them that was the NASCAR Drive to Survive equivalent that they did the first season. They were together as a couple, but it seems like they broke up before the Daytona 500. We've turned into TMZ here, by the way.
yes, so he is, to our knowledge, he is single. So
Yeah.
uh, I don't know what her status is, but yeah, it would be. I saw somebody say it would be actually quite hilarious to see Sabrina Carpenter end up with the Liberty University driver. Uh, but yeah, I'd be all in for it. That'd be great if that worked out the way it did there. Another question in the inbox this week, and this one comes from Seth. Seth wants to know, guys, what is the best place to watch a race from? Dom, I'll start with you. I think you've been everywhere from the infield to the press box, the stands. If you were just to give perspective, where would you say is the best place to watch a race from? And it probably depends on the track too.
If you wanted to fight traffic, it's nice to be able to watch it at home sometimes so you don't have to fight all the traffic.
That's a good
I'm just
answer
being a
too.
smart ass here, but no, yeah, I think you can't beat the view in a grandstand. And the higher up you are, I think better. I think people would disagree with me if you're at a football game, you don't want to be high up. I personally do. I like that bird's eye view, and I take that perspective to a NASCAR race. You want to be able to see as much of the action as you can on the track. So I feel like being up in the grandstands, being able to get a higher view, at least where you can see the entire track, is something I would recommend. If you get the opportunity to go to an infield at a racetrack, I think those are really awesome too, because you have some more shaded areas. You're down there at eye level of the action. Now you might have to rely on monitors a little bit more, but that would be an option as well. And Tyler, you and I have visited various press boxes and some of those suite type areas at racetracks over the year too. I feel like those are a good blend of both worlds as well. If a fan's ever getting the opportunity to go to a suite, because you get that climate controlled environment, but you're still getting enough loudness, but where it's not overbearing, where you can still carry conversation with someone and not have to need earplugs.
So if you're not working, Dom, if and let's just say money's not an issue, and you just get to enjoy the race, which is very rare for us. We're usually doing stuff. If I tell Dom you can be anywhere and just enjoy the race and you're not working, where are you going to choose?
Put me in a grandstand as high up as possible. I'll take my own hearing protection. Give me a little bit of shade. I can sit there all day.
All right, I'm going to give the spoiled answer now.
Oh, let's hear it.
I love the suites. Um, you get because usually these suites, you can be outside if you want to be and be in the action, or you can be inside. You mentioned the climate controlled, the noise where I can still have conversation with people. I can get the balance of both. And if I'm in the suites too, then there's obviously some free beverage and food on top of that as well. To me, that to me is the best experience because you get a little bit of both. Because the noise it can be a lot. Like you can't have conversations with people, and if you're in the suite too, you can go listen to the broadcast on the TV, or do that thing too. Like I like having it. It sounds bougie to be in the suites, but I think you get a little bit of everything in that sense.
Yeah, you get a taste of everything. I would agree with that, especially to get that opportunity. If you're invited to a suite or an area where you can be a part of that, you get some really, really cool blends of both worlds.
And even in NASCAR, now I know I use the term bougie. It's still not bougie compared to other sports. Like you can still have an authentic NASCAR experience and embrace your inner redneck even in a suite at a NASCAR race.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't imagine you getting that experience at an NFL game. You're too shielded off in some sort of suite area.
Right, dressing up or whatever it may be. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know how to do that NASCAR race. On that note, we will get out of here. Make sure to subscribe. The show new episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on social media at Star Podcasts on X and on Facebook. Also by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. Dom, little home game for you this weekend. You get to live vicariously through me in Austin this weekend.
Yeah, and like you said at the top of the show, I think this is the first time since 2020 that you've beat me to a racetrack to start the year at the NASCAR because you were at the 2020 Daytona
Oh,
500.
that's right.
My first race was until the next week at Las Vegas. So yeah, you got me beat on this one again. So 5 years in the making, I guess. But yeah, have some fun out there. I know you guys are going to have a great time, and I'll be hitting the road. This will be my last home game of sorts for a little bit. Hitting the road in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited to be at COTA. This is one of my favorite races. Going to be so much fun, and get to see some old friends and watch some great NASCAR racing and just enjoy it. And weather looks fantastic too this weekend. So uh, certainly going to have a great time. Follow me on all social media platforms. I'll have updates from the racetrack and bringing some great content, great coverage from there. So. Without further ado, we will put the checkered flag out on this edition of Let's Go Racing. Subscribe to the show. Check out this show as well as the rest of the Studio Soapbox Network, the Jones Report, Coach Bono's podcast, and all podcast platforms. You can find us there. For Dominic Aragon, I'm Tyler with Jones. Thanks so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.